Welcome into your Eye on Northeast Kansas podcast, where you get to recap some of the best guests from the week that was on our Eye on Northeast Kansas TV show. I'm your host, Melissa Bruner. The show, by the way, streams live 4 o'clock Central Time, Monday through Friday on WIBW.com and our WIBW News mobile app. We love when our lawmakers come to visit, and the Kansas Legislature is currently on first adjournment on their break while they wait to come back and address some unfinished business. There are some big issues that remain unsettled. There also were some very intense emotional debates. Topeka Area Representative Fred Patton, he is a Republican and chairperson of the House Judiciary Committee. He took time to make a visit to the Red Couch this week. He not only talked about some of those issues still on the table, but also what his Judiciary Committee accomplished, why he felt that was important, and he also explained some of those key votes that he cast this session. So let's start with your committee. If you had to list what your accomplishments have been, what's come through your committee this session?
We've had a lot. I think we had 52 bills that came through my committee. Most of the stuff doesn't apply to the average Kansan. We adjusted probate dollar figures, interest rates in cases. Speedy trial is a big one. During COVID, we had to pause speedy trial. So the amount of time that people in jail had to go to before they had to go to court. We paused that, and so we had to start that back up.
But you still have a little bit of an extension because the courts are still catching up, correct?
We do, right. We still gave them an extension, but by the end of the year, they're telling us they can be caught up. So we're hoping that happens.
Are there any big issues still outstanding in your committee?
No, actually everything got done. Everything that I wanted to get passed got passed before we left on first adjournment. So I'm done with the work in my committee. There's
a lot of work left for the legislature as a whole, though, and a big one would be school funding. And you are someone, you served on the Seaman School District's Board of Education for a very long time. What's the thought process with school funding? There's been a lot of accusations back and forth. Special ed's getting too much money. No, we haven't ever cut funding. Yes, we have cut funding. Right. So what's going on with the school funding?
It's a constant battle over school funding. There's some in the legislature, a number in the legislature, who, as we give more money, want to attach policy to it, right? So they want to see this or that change in our schools. And so we often end up with these bundled bills that include money and then some policy. And so the challenge for us is coming up with something that doesn't have enough policy in it, bad policy in it, as someone who maybe doesn't support it would say, but also wants to see the money. And so we're working our way through that.
School vouchers, we're trying to get some momentum this session. You did vote against it.
Right.
Why? What is your thought process and your reasoning for that?
With all of the issues, I do my best to truly represent the people that live in the 50th district. And I hear over and over again that they don't support vouchers. And so because of that, I don't support them. I can see how they could benefit some students in some areas of the state where they have a number of private schools or other options, and maybe there's a mechanism there that could be helpful, but the proposals I've seen just are not something that those in the 50th district would support.
We received news last week that the revenue collections were above estimates. We still do have the overall budget, the school budget, hanging out there.
Right.
Also, tax discussion. The governor was sent a bill for a flat tax. I believe the flat tax is something that you voted for. It could come back to you in the form of a veto. Why would a flat tax be a good approach, or was it simply it was a compromise because that also contained the food sales tax?
Right, it is a compromise. We went back and forth with the Senate. We came up with, I thought, a really good House position. It was supported by the vast majority of the House, Republicans and Democrats. It went to the Senate when we came back from conference committee. It wasn't nearly as bipartisan, but I think the flat tax, the percentage we came up with is reasonable. It does speed up food sales tax. It's got some property tax relief in there and some social security tax benefits. So it seemed like a good package. We'll see what the governor does.
I want to ask you about your votes on a couple of the transgender issue bills that came up. You did support the Fairness in Women's Sports Act, and that is one that limits school sport participation to biological girls and women. But at the same time, you voted against the bill that would have banned gender-affirming care. Some would say those are conflicting positions. Explain those votes, please.
Again, I try to represent my district, and on the Fairness in Women's Sports, I've heard from a number of people. Moms, teachers, people I meet in the grocery store saying, they don't only want girls playing with their girls when they're playing sports. We voted on that 3 or 4 times now since I've been in the legislature, and I don't get a whole lot of pushback on that, and I feel like the people I hear from the district support that. On the other one, we never had a committee hearing on that. It was an issue that came to us for final action. I've not heard from people on either side of that issue, and so I didn't feel comfortable voting for it until I hear from people one way or the other.
How do you respond to people on the Fairness in Women's Sports Act who say transgender women are women, and this is a hateful piece of legislation?
I understand that concern, and I don't like that we're appearing to target certain individuals. But again, I'm sent there to represent my district, and that's what I hear. And like it or not, on any issue, I do my best to vote the way they want me to vote, and I think that's where they're at on it, so that's where I'm at.
As part of the budget, where does discussion stand? A lot of state employees are out there saying, hey, if we have extra revenue, what about us? What about our paycheck?
Yes, so the governor proposed, I think, a 5% across the board pay increase for state employees. That was not in the budget we've passed yet, but we always come back once we know how much money we get from tax collections and do our final budget. I am confident there's going to be a raise in there for state employees. I don't know for sure the amount, but I'm hoping we can do 5% or so for all of our employees.
What is your prediction on the length of the wrap-up session? Normally you guys say 3 days we'll be out of there. What are we thinking?
So my longest session, we went until like June 23rd.
There have been some long ones.
I feel pretty confident we will be done in a matter of days. So we still have some big issues, but we're close on all of them. So I think we can wrap up maybe by the end of that first week.
We will see how your prediction holds. You guys go back April 24th-ish, I believe is when you're adjourned to that week. Exactly. Fred Patton, representative from Topeka, the northern part of Topeka, Shawnee County. Appreciate you being here and for offering your thoughts on these issues so far. And yes, the Kansas Legislature is in recess until April 24th. They will be monitoring any activity from Governor Laura Kelly's office as well if she vetoes any other legislation, and then we'll be following whether or not they try to override those vetoes, and then, of course, any agreements that they are reaching when it comes to some of those funding and school issues still up in the air. kslegislature.org, by the way, is where you can find text of bills. There's also a lot of live streaming that happens, so if you want to watch our lawmakers at work, head online and do that. We continued the conversations this week for Sexual Assault Awareness Month. Michelle McCormick is the executive director of the Kansas Coalition Against Sexual and Domestic Violence. Last week, she was on the Red Couch with KBI Director Tony Mattivi. They talked a bit about how sexual assault has become a priority for law enforcement and some of the awareness work they've done surrounding that. This week, Michelle was back, and we talked about why this is such a tough issue for people to talk about, why sometimes it's hard for victims to seek help, and why it can be hard for us to help maybe a friend or a loved one who has been a victim as well. So she went through some key points, some key things that we can do, questions to ask, how to act, how to react if we have to have one of these tough conversations. It's great information. This is an obvious question, I'm sure, but why is it so hard to talk about sexual assault?
Yeah, well, I think it's very difficult for a number of reasons. One, we know that survivors of sexual assault experience a fair amount of shame. I think one of the number one things I've heard survivors tell me over the years is that they're worried people aren't going to believe them and what they experienced. But also a significant percentage of people who experience sexual assault know the person who perpetrated against them. And so it becomes extremely nuanced and difficult because they're navigating those dynamics in that it often isn't a stranger who assaulted them, but somebody they're in relationship with, maybe they even care about. And so it becomes really challenging for folks who they may be disclosed to know how to respond to a complicated issue.
Right, if you're on the flip side and either someone says something to you or you suspect and you're not sure if you should bring it up, how do you even broach the subject?
Yeah, I think, usually my guidance is to let anyone who is a survivor come to you first so that they feel safe enough to make that disclosure. But if someone does make that disclosure to you, we want folks to feel prepared about how to respond because it can be really shocking when someone says something that difficult.
And you have a list of advice that you gave us.
Yeah, absolutely. I would encourage anyone who a disclosure happens to one, sort of make sure they're creating the kind of space where a survivor can share their story in a way where they don't feel judged, right? So don't try as hard as you can to not have a judgmental response. But also we want folks to really know that it's important to share with survivors that you believe them. You believe that what they are sharing with you has in fact happened to them. And then we want you to know how to encourage them to know what options are available for them. And so we really think it's important for folks to know how to refer to their local victim advocacy program, how to refer to medical services that may be appropriate, and make referrals to law enforcement if that's something the survivor wants to do.
And that's why we talk about it now, so folks who are out there listening will know if this ever comes into their lives, to know that those resources are out there. If you are someone who has been sexually assaulted, and that's where the next list of advice comes in here, What do you want them to know?
Yeah, it's certainly important for us, for folks to hear the message that it's not your fault, right? Because a lot of survivors will immediately question, what did I do wrong to cause this? And it's important for us to assign the responsibility to the perpetrator, the person who did the harm. And so we want folks to hear that. Also to know what services are available in their local community, because every county in Kansas has an agency that provides them services. And so
every county has something.
Yeah, it might not be right in the county that they're located, but all counties have coverage by an agency who would be willing to respond to them.
And of course, you are not alone. There are a lot of people out there who are there to surround them.
Absolutely. First of all, this unfortunately happens to a lot of folks, and so you're not alone because the prevalence is pretty significant, but also there are a lot of supporters who want to provide support and assistance if this does happen.
It's right when you talk about making sure people realize that they are not at fault, because there are a lot of times people hear about an incident and they start asking, well, where were you? Were you drinking? What were you wearing? And there are some very powerful displays and documentation on that very topic.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, I would encourage folks to check out one of our member programs in Hays, Kansas is running a display for Sexual Assault Awareness Month called What Were You Wearing? And I know that's an exhibit that's traveled around the state to demonstrate that it has nothing to do with someone's clothing, article of clothing, that folks were sexually assaulted wearing scrubs, wearing their pajamas, wearing jeans and a t-shirt.
Right.
And so that old sort of myth about were you wearing something provocative that caused this is simply that. It's a myth. And so we do try to challenge those understandings.
Can you shout out some of the local organizations that we have? I know in Topeka, there's the YWCA Center for Safety and Empowerment. Emporia has SOS. What are some of the other organizations?
Yeah, absolutely. There are 25 member programs across the state, but in this region, we also have the Willow in Lawrence. There's a program in Leavenworth. Certainly SOS in Emporia covers a pretty significant service area. There's also the Manhattan Crisis Center. And so you can go to our website, kcsdv.org,
which we
to
have right
see
there.
All of the member programs. They're listed on a map, and so folks could easily find the services available in their area.
And that very important phone number that we want to be sure we pass along to you every week when we have these conversations, there is a 24/7 crisis line, 1-888-END-ABUSE. If you or someone you know needs information, needs support, that is a number that you can go to. And of course, that number is also available on the Kansas Coalition Against Sexual and Domestic Violence website as well. Michelle, thank you once again. Fantastic information. We appreciate you being here.
Thank you for having us.
1-888-END-ABUSE. Keep that number handy if you or a loved one should ever need it. One way that you can offer support is knowing what resources are there. We'll look forward to having Michelle back in our studio next week, where we address another facet of this really broad issue of sexual assault awareness. We're going to take a look at some of the underserved communities and why it can be such a challenge for them to come forward and get help. So important discussions taking place this April during Sexual Assault Awareness Month. Another important conversation will be taking place next Tuesday. This is actually a time to step back and remember the Holocaust. The state of Kansas Holocaust Commemoration. It is an annual event. It takes place Tuesday, April 18th this year. And recently we had Rabbi Sam Stern. He's with Temple Beth Shalom in Topeka in the studio. He was joined by Harold Youngentob. He is an attorney in Topeka, and he has a very personal connection to the Holocaust. He is going to be the keynote speaker at the commemoration. He told us a little bit of his family's story when he visited Ion Northeast Kansas. Rabbi, let's start with you. This commemoration takes place every year. It's a statewide event. Why is this so special and so important?
Well, the Holocaust was a crime unique in scope and scale. And while it primarily impacted the Jewish community, there are, back in the 1940s, there are a lot of things that we can learn from it even here today in America. We can learn lessons about the descent from democratic governance into authoritarianism. We can learn about individual versus communal responsibility. And so it's really great that our state officials and school children and teachers from around Kansas come to Topeka every year to commemorate what happened in the Holocaust, so they can be the ones who carry forward the message that this kind of thing can never be allowed to happen again.
What will all be included in this year's service?
Well, the governor will sign her proclamation declaring it Holocaust Memorial Day. We will also feature candle lightings from dignitaries from around the state and lawmakers. and of course our keynote from Harold Youngentob.
Yes, and Harold, you have quite a story to share. What happened with your family that you want people to know?
I appreciate being here. Thank you for the opportunity to alert people that the story will be told on Tuesday, April 18th at 1 o'clock. And at that time, I'm honored to be the keynote speaker, at which time I'll speak to the fact that unfortunately this great generation that were fortunate enough to survive the Holocaust have now passed on. And it leaves to the children of the Holocaust survivor, of which I am one, to tell that story.
It was your mother and your uncle, correct?
My mother, Irene Youngentob, and my uncle, Louis Poses, who was here in Topeka, Kansas after he left Poland. He was saved from the Holocaust while, unfortunately, his parents, my grandparents, and his brother, my uncle, were brutally murdered by the Nazis in 1941. Fortunately, my mom and Louis Poses were able to get out of Poland through an uncle who lived here in Topeka, Kansas, Abe Poses. He worked with the then governor, Walter Huxman, to get visas when visas were almost impossible to get because unfortunately there was anti-Semitism and the United States didn't invite very many Eastern Jews to come over, and they were saved. And the trip that we took was a trip sponsored by my uncle Louis Poses that brought 30 family members to Breslatov, which is in the eastern part of Poland. And we got to visit the site of where the family home was. And we got to visit the site where my mom's parents and Louis' parents were machine gunned and killed by the Nazis.
Well, this is obvious.
And this was an effort to obtain some closure and some understanding of what is really impossible to understand.
Well, it is quite a story, and it certainly is a reason why you know firsthand, your family, why this is something that we should all remember and pause and commemorate at least once a year, if not more often. Thank you for sharing that. And if you would like to attend, the State of Kansas Holocaust Commemoration is 1 o'clock next Tuesday, April 18th, at the downtown Ramada in Topeka. It is free, open to the public. If you cannot make it but would like to watch, they will have a live stream at the MCHE Kansas City YouTube channel. We'll get that link on WIBW.com. Rabbi, Harold, thank you, and we look forward to hearing more from you and more of your story next week.
Thank you.
Appreciate that. Harold's story is going to be so powerful. I mean, I just sat there enthralled, even for just the 3 minutes that he was sharing that little piece of his family's history with me. It was just incredible. So you can hear him, the State of Kansas Holocaust Commemoration, 1 p.m. Tuesday, April 18th at the downtown Ramada in Topeka. If you go to WIBW.com under ION Northeast Kansas, there is a link where they're going to be live streaming it that day and on YouTube, as well as where you'd be able to find the video afterward if you aren't hearing this in time to be able to see it live. So check that out. A regular visitor to the Red Couch on ION Northeast Kansas is Carl Carlson. He's the founder and CEO of Carlson Financial. He always has some very interesting information and perspective for us. This week, he talked a bit about all the recent banking turmoil that we've heard about. There have been bank failures. There have been some market instability. So what does that all mean if you're hoping to actually have your retirement savings be there? We got some thoughts from Carl. Carl, thank you for being here. First of all,
Great to be here.
I guess, how worried should we be? That
It depends.
I knew it.
So someone that's maybe just retired, you just retired, and all of a sudden all of your investments drop by 25, 30%. Now you're, oh my gosh, that person is worried, and rightfully so, if they haven't done the proper planning. So if you're worried about what's happening right now with all of the market volatility and all that, that means that you haven't built your financial house correctly.
So what do we do to rectify that situation?
Yep, so you start to look at, all right, I'm nervous, why? Okay, I see I don't like these drops in the market, so I need to change my investments and move more to safety and find products that'll still give me a good return, but I don't have to worry about those products going down. You still want to keep some things in the market, and you have to learn to deal with a little bit of volatility up and down when things are happening, when banks are failing, the market's dropping, inflation's going up, the market's dropping. But you have to learn to deal with some of that. Now, that depends on how much safety you have. So somebody that's just, I can't stand it, then that person might have 80% of their money safe and only 20% in the market. Someone else that's maybe younger, not going to retire for 15 or 20 years.
More of a risk taker.
Yep, they're like, oh, I have 80% in the market, it doesn't bother me, and 20% safe. So you start figuring that out. And then the other thing is, the closer you get to retirement, then you're going to want to have safe money so that when you begin taking money out of your investments, you want to be taking money out of stocks and investments that are going up, but whenever they drop, you don't want to sell them when they're down. So you're going to switch and go over and take money out of your safe side because it didn't go down. And maybe you're doing that for a year or 2 years or 3 years. And then the market comes back up, you stop taking money out of the safe, you switch back to the more volatile because it's back up, and you sell some of that, replace the safe money, and off you go again, and you're just learning how to keep everything in balance.
How much of that strategy, too, is if you're younger, historically, over time, the market corrects itself. So if you're younger, there's time for those recoveries to happen.
Yes.
Do you need to be, as you are older, a little bit more conservative, or at least have more in that safe pool?
Yeah, I would say normally if you're going to rely on your investments for income, so maybe you don't have a pension and your Social Security is not going to be enough, so you have to rely on taking money out of your investments in retirement. Probably at about age 50, you need to start shifting some things to a little bit more on the safe side. Okay. And there's potential. You can find investments on the safe side that can earn 5, 6, 7, 8% a year. So you don't have to be limited to, oh my gosh, I'm only going to make 2% over here and then take too much risk.
And it's so easy to think, these banks are in California and New York that have failed here in the recent months. It's easy to think, well, it's not here and I don't have my money directly in that bank. But is it just, is the reason it concerns us because of the overall impact it has?
Yeah, it impacts your stocks. So when a bank fails somewhere, the whole economy starts to rattle a little bit, especially when 2 or 3 or 4 do, and they're big ones. Then the market drops, and now all of a sudden there goes your 401k or your investments that you were going to take money out of for income.
So here, once again, as Carl always tells us, having a plan in place and regularly revisiting that plan and adjusting.
Yep, exactly.
Planning, planning, planning. That is a recurring theme for Carl and always good advice. The Topeka and Shawnee County Public Library has a lot of fun planned for the week of April 16th to the 22nd. That is the week of the young child. Diana Friend from the library brought some blocks to explain one of the events they have planned and also why this focus on literacy is so vital. But before we got to that, we updated their strategic planning process. Your strategic planning process really got into a new phase today. What launched today, and what do you want to hear from people?
Well, we launched the community survey, which follows up on the community focus groups that we had in February, because we are collecting information from you and you and you.
Everybody.
We want everybody to tell them what they need and want from their public library, because that way we will be prepared in the next 3 to 5 years to actually meet the needs of our community.
There is a QR code that you have, so we want to put that on the screen while we talk about the sorts of things that you're evaluating here.
Right. Do you like coming to the library? Do you like digital books? Do you think that we need more than one library? Do you think that we need to do something different at our library building? This is your opportunity to fill out a really quick 10-minute survey and just click off. Most of it's multiple choice, but there is a section where you can put in whatever you would like us to know about your needs for Topeka and Shawnee County and in your public library.
And if you don't do QR codes, it's also through the tscpl.org website.
Yes.
Okay, Week of the Young Child. That's why the blocks are here. What is Week of the Young Child all about? And I'm just going to grab some.
Well, it's a time that they recognize. Yes, they recognize the needs of the young child, of developing that human into a person that's ready to go to kindergarten, ready to learn. And we partner with Topeka Public Schools. And you're holding a sample of what we're going to be doing on Tuesdays and Thursdays. It's called Blockfest. And all of the different STEM learning that you talk about, science, technology, engineering, and math. And of course, we throw an R in there, so we have stream for a little bit of reading.
And you said they're going to actually have giant blocks to play with
They actually have giant
this.
blocks that they come in, and they do that.
So much going on. Why is it so important that we promote literacy among young children?
Well, it's the building blocks of how you survive in this world today, because if you can't read, you can't learn, then it's going to be hard for you to find a job or to graduate from high school, or for you and I to have a conversation.
Right.
So literacy uses so many of those brain synapses that you need to get working as young as possible. So the library says every kid's going to be ready for kindergarten, so this is one of the activities that we look forward to every year.
tscpl.org, that's the website. Find the calendar of events for the Topeka and Shawnee County Public Library. You'll see when all of those activities and more are taking place. They have some fun author talks and events coming up as well. We have another cool activity that is really getting young people in the community involved. It's the Three Shields Boxing Academy. The Three Shields stand for the partnership between the Topeka Police Department through its Police Athletic League, as well as the Topeka Fire Department and the Topeka Salvation Army. They combine for a youth boxing academy. Longtime volunteer coach and current state representative John Elkla is one of those who spearheads this effort. He was joined on the Red Couch this week by Police Athletic League coach Officer Darren Campbell and Grandpa Clay, who is not only a volunteer coach, but his grandson also was involved in the Three Shields Boxing Academy. And John, let's start with you because you have been part of the local boxing community for a very long time. What was it that made you see this need to partner with the Salvation Army and bring boxing to young people?
Well, in the late 90s, when I retired from boxing to become elected official, I said I'd always come back. And so when I retired from Hill's Pet Nutrition, I still had another stint in the Legislative House, but that's only 90 days. So I said, it's time to start another boxing program. So we did. Actually, we were already in the move to, we had a location and we were getting ready to set up, and I was reached out, the mayor reached out to me, him and Captain Lopez from the Salvation Army, and said they had a facility they'd like for us to run a program at. So we went down and looked at it. It was too small. So as we were leaving, they had this big annex building out in the parking lot that was just full of stuff, like hoarder stuff.
And now it is filled with boxing
Now it's
stuff.
filled with boxing
and that's
stuff.
where you reach out to other partners, and Topeka Police and Topeka Fire came in. The Police Athletic League comes in. How did you all start up with this and decide to continue with it?
Well, it all started with Sergeant Lister in the Police Athletic League, who got it all started.
And he's here, by the way.
He's here.
He's just over in the corner lurking.
Yes.
But
And then I have been involved with the schools for the last 10 years, and I've worked with kids for a long time. So my involvement, when Sergeant Lister decided to take a promotion, I was involved with the Police Athletic League and doing multiple different things, flag football, basketball, but boxing was one that I knew that we had, but I wasn't that familiar with it. So I've got to spend some time with Coach John here, and he has taught me a lot about boxing.
And Grandpa, what is it that you have tried to impart to the kids along the way besides just the boxing skills?
Well, I kind of started out just here not too long ago either, and I have a grandson that goes down there that's got me started, and then of course I started coaching, helping out.
What have you seen in your grandson through taking these lessons?
Well, he's come a long ways, you know, from getting active into boxing and just his total attitude, you know, towards things. He's got a real good outlook on everything, and it helps with his mental state and everything else to keep him active. And
More than just the physical skills. And we're seeing some photos, John, that are from folks in the program. How much has this grown?
Well, I'd say that we're probably, average participation is about 60 a night. We could clock it up to about 100 people in membership that have signed up. We're 7 days a week. Brand new kids are Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. and the advanced kids are every night, and the competitive kids are Sunday afternoon at 1:30.
Officer Campbell, how do people get involved?
They just show up. We tell them, we put it out on social media everywhere. Monday, Thursday, or Saturday is when we have our beginners. They're from 5 p.m. to 7 p.m. on Monday and Thursday, and from 10 a.m. to noon on Saturday.
Your best pitch, Grandpa Clay. Why do you think kids should go?
I expect a real good workout. Enjoy your time there, and everybody's there to help you out. And
Just reach out to the Topeka Salvation Army on Southeast 6th if you are interested in the program. And young people from all across the area attend, not just those from one part of town. John Elkel is so passionate about the program, so any questions, just let him know. We had a busy but fun week in the studio for Eye on Northeast Kansas. Hope you enjoyed listening to just a little part of it. Of course, you can also see the videos for all of these segments on our Eye on Northeast Kansas page on WIBW.com. Also on my Facebook page, WIBW Melissa Bruner. Be sure you subscribe to the podcast so you can listen to this every week. And of course, you can see the show streaming live every day on WIBW.com and our WIBW mobile app, 4 o'clock Central Time, Monday through Friday. Have a great week, everyone. We'll see you on the Red Couch.